Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, September 4th, 2025. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. defends his vaccine policy changes and firing of top officials at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention before the Senate Finance Committee. Almost all of the committee's Democrats are calling on him to resign. Secretary Kennedy also asked about studies on the causes of autism and his comments following the school shooting in Minneapolis on side effects of antidepressants. Federal Reserve Governor nominee Stephen Miran tells the Senate Banking Committee he is committed to the independence of the Fed as he gets questions about any plans to return to his current job at the White House when his term ends in January. Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services talks about bringing in armed law enforcement to the agency and says he wants to make the U.S. citizenship test tougher. Missouri's legislature takes up a congressional redistricting map to flip a Democratic seat to Republican, part of a nationwide effort led by the White House in red states, being countered by Democrats in blue states. And First Lady Melania Trump hosts a meeting of the White House Task Force on AI education at the White House with the leaders of large technology companies like Google, Apple, and Meta. Associated Press writes that U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came under pointed bipartisan questioning in a rancorous 3-hour Senate committee hearing on Thursday about, among other things, turmoil at federal health agencies and efforts to pull back recommendations for COVID-19 vaccinations. Kennedy's exchanges with Democratic senators on the panel repeatedly devolved into shouting from both sides, but some Republican senators also expressed unease with his changes to COVID-19 policies. That was from the Associated Press article. The secretary testified before the Senate Finance Committee. His opening statement included a few minutes about the firing of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Susan Menares and others at the agency.
Finally, I would like to address the recent shakeups at CDC. These changes were absolutely necessary adjustments to restore the agency to its role as the world's gold standard public health agency with the central mission of protecting Americans from infectious disease. CDC failed that responsibility miserably during COVID, when its disastrous and nonsensical policies destroyed small businesses, violated civil liberties, closed our schools, caused generational damage in doing so, masked infants with no science, and heightened economic inequality. And yet all those oppressive and unscientific interventions failed to do anything about the disease itself. America is home to 4.2% of the world's population, yet we had nearly 20% of the COVID deaths. We literally did worse than any country in the world. And the people at CDC who oversaw that process, who put masks on our children, who closed our schools, are the people who will be leaving. And that's why we need bold, competent, and creative new leadership at CDC. People able and willing to chart a new course. As my father once said, progress is a nice word, but change is its motivator, and change has its enemies. That's why we need new blood at CDC. That's also why it's imperative that we remove officials with conflicts of interest and catastrophically bad judgment and political agendas. We need unbiased, politics-free, transparent, evidence-based science in the public interest. Those are the guiding principles behind the changes at the CDC, and that is what you can expect all across our agency for the next 3 years.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., part of his opening statement at today's Senate Finance Committee hearing. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, who sits on the Finance Committee and also chairs the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and was a crucial vote to confirm Secretary Kennedy, today pressed the Secretary about COVID-19 vaccines and the program under the first Trump administration that fast-tracked their development, Operation Warp Speed.
Agree with me that the president deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. That was phenomenal.
Let me ask you, but you just told Senator Bennett that the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID.
Wait,
that was a statement.
I did not say that.
Okay, then let me ask, because you also were
Senator, I just want to make clear, I did not say that.
We'll check the record. That's a question of fact. You also said that you were also, as lead attorney for the Children's Health Defense, you engaged in multiple lawsuits attempting to restrict access to the COVID vaccine. Again, it surprises me that you think so highly of Operation Warp Speed when, as an attorney, you attempted to restrict access. Now, let me ask.
I'm happy to explain why.
I had 3 minutes and 30 seconds left.
All right.
It also surprises me because you've canceled, or HHS did, but apparently under your direction, $500 million in contracts using the mRNA vaccine platform that was critical to Operation Warp Speed. Again, an accomplishment that I think President Trump should get a Nobel Prize for. You canceled $500 million in contracts. Now, I grew up in a middle-class family, so $500 million seems, just to cancel, it seems like an incredible waste of money. But it also seems like a commentary upon what the president was attempting, what the president did in Operation Warp Speed, which is to create a platform by which to create vaccines. So this just seems inconsistent that you would agree with me the president deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this.
Is this a question, Senator Cassidy, or is this a speech that you don't want me to answer? Because I want to answer that question.
Please, please.
If it's a question.
But be tight, please.
First of all, the reason that Operation Warp Speed was genius is it did something nobody had ever been done. I don't think any president, but President Trump could do it. It got the vaccine to market that was perfectly matched to the virus at that time when it was badly needed, because there was low natural immunity and there were people getting very badly injured by COVID. But it was also brought in therapeutics like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and protocols for treatments. And there were no mandates. And then
okay, I have another question, so please, about 15
that's
seconds.
when I began litigating against President Biden's mandates.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., part of the questioning from Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, who's also a physician, at today's Finance Committee hearing. NBC News reporting on the hearing. Conservative commentator Eric Erickson reiterated in a post on X that his wife, who has cancer, could not get a COVID vaccine. He wrote, "Kennedy says I'm wrong, but my wife literally went to get the vaccine and CVS could not give it to her." Earlier in the hearing, Senator Bill Cassidy had read a note from Erickson who said that HHS would prevent his wife from getting a COVID vaccine. Kennedy said that wasn't true. That was from NBC News. Senator Roger Marshall, Republican of Kansas, also a physician, also asked the secretary about vaccines and COVID, but from a different emphasis.
Sometimes my friends across the aisle feel like there's a one-size-fits-all, that they should be telling parents what to do. And what you and I are fighting for is we want to empower parents to make these decisions. I want to talk about morbidity and mortality of COVID for just a second. It is so true that two things can be true, and I don't understand why, just the rabbit hole some of my colleagues are going down. There's a big difference. When I was out there practicing, doing volunteer work, I was so confused myself on the numbers. People dying with COVID versus from COVID. And we still don't have that message. And I think that's what I hear you saying as well. How many people died from COVID versus with COVID is a different answer. The situation today is so different when this monster virus was made in a laboratory in Wuhan, China, and none of us had ever seen this virus and we had no immunity to it. But today, every American's had COVID a dozen times probably, and we built up immunity. I think that's why both things are true. It was a miracle. Warp Speed was a miracle, what President Trump and his team did, and it saved millions of lives most likely. But it's also true that it probably killed some people. Like most vaccines do, there is a death rate associated. So both things are true. Anything else you want to clear up on the morbidity, mortality of COVID and COVID vaccines?
Well, I think you just cleared it up. The COVID vaccine was critical. President Trump's leadership got it to us when our society was locked down. It allowed us to open up. It was, as I said, perfectly matched to a virus that was new in the experience of humanity. And so it was a miracle. Right now, we're dealing with completely different circumstances where the virus has mutated, where it's much less dangerous, where there's a lot of natural immunity and herd immunity. And so the calculus is different and it's complicated. And, if you just want to turn everything into a soundbite, it makes it, you can't have a grown-up conversation. But, there were more reports to VAERS, which is the only surveillance system that we have, of injuries and deaths from that vaccine than all vaccines put together in history. So we have to acknowledge that there was a cause. We acknowledge that there was a benefit. We can't quantify either one because of the data chaos at CDC, and that's all I'm saying. And they think I'm being evasive because I won't make a kind of a statement that's almost religious in nature. Did it save 1 million lives? Well, there's no data to support that. Or maybe data, there's no study that there's modeling studies, there's faulty data. I'm not going to sign on to something if I can't do it to a scientific certainty. It doesn't mean that I'm, anti-vax. It just means I'm pro-science.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Health and Human Services Secretary, questioned by Senator Roger Marshall, Republican of Kansas, at today's Finance Committee hearing. Former Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Susan Menarez, wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed today that she was let go because she refused to pre-approve the vaccine recommendations from an advisory panel that was restaffed with vaccine skeptics picked by Secretary Kennedy. Menarez begins, "I served for 29 days as director of the CDC. The Senate confirmed me to ensure that unbiased evidence serves our nation's health. And for that, I lost my job. America's children could lose far more." Back to the hearing with Secretary Kennedy, Senators Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, asking about the fate of Susan Menarez.
Medicaid
You tell the head of the CDC that if she refused to sign off on your changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, that she had to resign?
No, I told her that she had to resign because I asked her, "Are you a trustworthy person?" And she said no. So if you had an employee who told you they weren't trustworthy, would you ask them to resign, Senator?
So I'm sorry, but this is not what she has said publicly. She has said
I'm not surprised about that.
So you're saying she's lying?
Yes. Every conversation I had with her, there were
And let me
witnesses.
get this straight. This is the same person that less than a month earlier, you stood next to her and described her as unimpeachable, and you had full confidence in her, and that you had full confidence in her scientific credentials. And in a month, she became a liar?
Yeah, you should ask her what changed. And by the way, a month ago, you were voting against her. Oh, because you thought she was either incompetent, ineligible, or unsuited to the task.
I voted against her because I
you.
was afraid she was going to bend the knee to you and Donald Trump. And it looks like she didn't bend the knee, so you fired her. Look, you're putting America's babies' health at risk, America's seniors' health at risk, all Americans' health at risk, and you should resign.
Senator Sanders. Just want to pick up on Senator Warren's point. Are you telling us that the former head of CDC went to you, you asked her, are you a trustworthy person? And she said, no, I am not a trustworthy person?
She didn't say, no, I'm not a trustworthy person. She said, no.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., questioned by Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, at the Finance Committee hearing. CNN writes that Secretary Kennedy pledged in April that there would be answers on the causes of autism this month. Since then, he has ousted public health officials, publicly rebuked studies showing no link between vaccines and autism, and said interventions are almost certainly responsible for causing rising autism rates. And proposed autism studies have not yet started. Thousands of researchers hailing from top universities and institutions in the country have applied for the federal funding that Kennedy announced in April. U.S. National Institute of Health is expected this month to announce up to 25 awardees for the $50 million massive research and testing effort. That was from CNN. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, Democrat of New Mexico, asked Secretary Kennedy about one reported researcher on autism.
You said that you're soon going to release a study claiming to reveal the cause of autism, timed unsurprisingly with the upcoming ACIP meeting to justify taking vaccines from Americans. Now, as you know, autism affects millions of children, so I guess you'd have the nation's top medical experts working on this. Mr. Kennedy, you hired a man named David Geyer to conduct this study. Is that correct?
No,
Is Mr. David Geyer working for HHS?
he's a contractor, but he's not conducting a study.
He's a contractor?
He's a
Do
contractor.
you know who works for you, Mr. Kennedy?
Yeah.
Do you know that Mr. Geyer is listed as a HHS on the employee directory as a senior data analyst, not a contractor?
He's a contractor. He's not an SGE.
So is your website wrong?
He's not an SGE. I don't know what
I'm going to pull up the website for you.
He's a contractor.
If the website says he is a senior data analyst, will you at least admit to the committee
Well, I don't
that you
know
were
if
wrong?
a contractor can be classified as a senior data
All
analysis
right, sir.
or not.
Is Mr. Geyer a doctor?
No.
Did you know he never went to medical school?
He's not practicing medicine.
Did you know that he got caught in Maryland and was charged for practicing medicine without a medical license?
He was charged by a medical board, he sued the medical board, and the medical board was found to have acted in actual malice and was fined $2.6 million by a judge in Maryland for doing that.
See, so you choose to know a lot when you want to know a lot. It's incredible, Mr. Kennedy.
Senator, you're
it's incredible,
ridiculous.
sir. So here's the question I have. You brought him in to do this study. I think there's no question
I
about it.
told you he's not doing a study.
Is he participating in the study?
No, what
Is he
he's
doing
doing,
any analysis in regards to this study?
no, what he's doing is getting access to the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which is the biggest repository for vaccine information that your friend would not give us for 7 months. For
Mr.
7 months.
Secretary, let me ask you this question, just so because you know the answer. What is Mr. Geyer doing?
He is the only one, because Congress ordered CDC to open up the VSD to him in 2002. He's the only outsider who's ever seen it. So
is he
because
Secretary,
CDC
I
will not
appreciate
give
that.
us, they have
Mr.
disadvantaged.
Secretary, is he participating in this then?
No, he is.
You just said he's the only dude that knows what's going on here.
Do you want me to explain it to you, Senator, or do you
No, because
just
you're
want to
confusing me,
show?
Mr.
Do you
I'll
just want to
submit it.
showboat?
I'll submit
You
this.
just want to showboat for your ads, or do you want to hear a real answer to your question?
Mr. Secretary, you choose to know answers to questions with some colleagues. And with others
I'm
you
willing to
pretend not
give you the
know.
answer. I'm
Maybe
willing
someone-
to give you the
Mr.
answer.
Secretary, someone should have asked you, maybe President Trump should have asked you, are you a trustworthy person? And we should have waited for an answer then. Let's move
I
on.
don't even know what you're talking about.
Mr.
You're
Secretary-
talking gibberish.
Part of today's Finance Committee hearing with testimony from Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., those questions from Senator Ben Ray Lujan, Democrat from New Mexico. Senator Tina Smith, a Democrat from Minnesota, asked the Secretary about the recent deadly school shooting in her state. Another CNN article reads, following the August 27th shooting at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, Secretary Kennedy suggested that antidepressants may be a culprit behind mass shootings and other violence. Kennedy told Fox News in an August 28th interview, we're launching studies on the potential contribution of some of the SSRI drugs and some of the other psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence. That was from the CNN article. Here's the exchange between Senator Tina Smith and Secretary Kennedy.
Just last week, in the days after the tragic shooting at Annunciation Catholic School in my home state of Minnesota, you went on Fox News blaming school shootings on antidepressants. You have no evidence of that because you have no evidence of a connection. And you want to talk about...
You're just saying something. You're just making stuff up.
You know, this is what you say, right? Secretary Kennedy, when someone presents you with information that does not fit
I did not blame that shooting. I have no idea whether... I have no idea, and I never said that. You're making it up. You're twisting. Yeah, you are.
Secretary
you are being
Kennedy,
dishonest right now.
If you want to talk about mental health and gun violence in this country, if you want to talk about mental health and gun violence in this country, we should be talking about that, because that's what the parents of Annunciation School
You don't want to talk. You want to
about.
harangue, and you want to politically. You want to have partisan politics.
That is
I want to actually solve these problems.
Secretary Kennedy, what the Trump administration is doing right now is making it harder for people in this country to get access to mental health care. So don't talk to me about solving the mental health care crisis when you are making it harder. You cut Medicaid, which is the #1 payer for mental health care services in this country. You decimated the agency at Health and Human Services that focuses on mental health and substance abuse. That's what states count on. They're cutting their services to schools as a result of that.
Senator Tina Smith, Democrat from Minnesota, questioning Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at today's Finance Committee hearing. You can find the full hearing, 3+ hours, at our video library, cspan.org. The story from The Hill: almost every Democratic member of the Senate Finance Committee called on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to step down as Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services following a major shakeup at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The only Democratic senator on the committee not to sign that letter, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. And after the hearing, Vice President J.D. Vance writing on X, "When I see all these senators trying to lecture and gotcha Bobby Kennedy today, all I can think is you all support off-label, untested, and irreversible hormonal therapies for children, mutilating our kids and enriching Big Pharma. You're full of profanity, and everyone knows it." This is Washington Today. From the New York Times, Stephen Miran, President Trump's pick for an open spot on the Federal Reserve, faced backlash on Thursday after revealing that he would only temporarily leave his position as a top economic advisor to Mr. Trump if he's confirmed as a Fed governor. Mr. Miran's comments made during his confirmation hearing amplified concerns about his willingness to uphold the longstanding independence of the central bank from political meddling. That independence has allowed the Fed to make decisions about interest rates and other policies based on what is best for the economy instead of what is best for the person occupying the White House. That's from the New York Times article. Stephen Miran is now chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, nominated to serve out a term on the Fed's Board of Governors that expires at the end of January. He testified before the Senate Banking Committee today, and in his opening statement did speak about the need for the Fed to be independent.
In my view, the most important job of the central bank is to prevent depressions and hyperinflations. Independence of monetary policy is a critical element for its success. Given the central bank's outsized role in the economy, it's no surprise that outsiders have opined on its decisions for decades. However, if confirmed, I plan to dutifully carry out my role pursuant to the mandates assigned by Congress. My opinions and decisions will be based on my analysis of the macroeconomy and what's best for its long-term stewardship. The Federal Open Market Committee is an independent group with a monumental task, and I intend to preserve that independence and serve the American people to the best of my ability. But the Fed's operations expand well beyond this scope. Managing financial system liquidity is a complex exercise requiring regular fine-tuning. The Fed oversees the most important global financial institutions. It sets varying prices of money for borrowers and lenders, including other central banks. The ultimate composition of the Fed's balance sheet is an open-ended question. Effective monetary policy is critical to the well-functioning of the economy, the preservation of America's robust capital markets, and the growing prosperity of our nation. Congress wisely tasked the Fed with pursuing price stability, maximum employment, and moderate long-term interest rates. If confirmed, I will transparently and honestly work towards that pursuit with the goal of preserving a stable and healthy economy that benefits all Americans.
Stephen Miran nominated for a spot on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, part of his opening statement before the Senate Banking Committee today. During the question and answer period, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, asked him about his plan to take a leave of absence from his current position as chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors to serve 4 months on the Fed.
This is a tweet from the first of this month. Quote, Jerome, too late Powell, a stubborn moron, must substantially lower interest rates. Now, if he continues to refuse, the board should assume control and do what everybody knows has to be done. So are you seriously telling me that if you were to vote and exercise judgment that was not consistent with what the President of the United States wants, that the President would not have you back at the Council of Economic Advisors, the job that you want to hold open for yourself?
Thank you, Senator. I actually interpret that statement as an exhortation to independent action by encouraging the members of the Federal Open Market Committee to vote their own views as opposed to taking direction from a chairman of the Federal Reserve. So I interpret those words as rather the opposite of what you do.
Have you've not seen the tweets where the President has threatened to try to fire Powell? Have you not seen those?
I've seen posts on Truth Social.
Okay. Well, I mean, he has done that repeatedly. And so for you to suggest that the president would somehow welcome you back with open arms at the Council of Economic Advisors, should you vote in a way that is opposed by the President of the United States, is just not credible in any way, given the president's repeated actions. Let me ask you about the situation over at the Bureau of Labor. Here's another tweet, actually the same day as the earlier one. Today's job numbers were rigged in order to make Republicans and me look bad. I have a very simple question, Dr. Miran. Do you think that the statistics were rigged in order to make the president look bad?
I think the statistics were allowed to deteriorate in quality steadily over the long.
That's a very different issue. We may agree or disagree on that, but that's very different than suggesting that they were intentionally rigged. Are you seriously suggesting, as the president did, that the numbers were rigged? Just a yes or no.
I believe that the numbers were allowed to deteriorate without taking corrective action.
That's non-responsive. I mean, it's non-responsive.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, questioning Federal Reserve Board of Governors nominee Stephen Miran at today's Banking Committee hearing. If he's confirmed, he would finish out the term of former Governor Adriana Kugler, who resigned, and that term runs through January. NPR article has this: the White House hopes to have Miran seated as a Fed governor before the next policy meeting in mid-September. The central bank is widely expected to cut its benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point in an effort to prop up the softening job market. And the Labor Department's jobs report for August comes out on Friday. It's the first since President Trump replaced the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's a story from Fox Business. Companies in the private sector added 54,000 jobs in August. Payroll processing firm ADP said Thursday. The figure is below economists' estimates of a gain of 65,000 jobs and down sharply from the prior month's revised reading of 106,000. That was from Fox Business. Wall Street today, the Dow up 350, NASDAQ up 209, S&P up 53. Washington today continues in a moment.
Coming up live Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN Radio, Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin shares her vision for the future of American national security and American foreign policy at an event hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations. Again, listen live starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN Radio, and find all of C-SPAN Radio's schedule information on our website at cspan.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines. Politico writes that House Republicans on Thursday narrowly passed their $57.3 billion spending package for the Energy Department and federal water programs, voting to make major cuts to renewable energy programs while boosting nuclear energy and other Republican priorities. Lawmakers approved the measure 214 to 213 after two Republicans who had initially voted against it switched sides. The squeaker came amid battles among Republicans over top-line spending levels, with conservatives pushing for far steeper cuts. That was from Politico. And C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan, writing on X, the Senate voted 83 to 13 to formally begin debate on the 2026 NDAA Defense Programs and Policy Bill. Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, wrote on X Wednesday night, "We have 214 signatures on the discharge petition to force a vote on a bill to release the Epstein files. I'm 99% certain we'll get 218. At that point, Speaker Mike Johnson may try to change the rules of the House, but the chair of the Rules Committee says she won't." And Meredith Lee Hill, reporter with Politico, writing on X today, Speaker Mike Johnson asked if he believes Thomas Massie will get the final GOP signatures he needs to trigger a vote on his bill to release Epstein docs. "I don't expect he will. Tells me Massie effort is superfluous after Republicans approved a symbolic oversight provision." From the Wall Street Journal, the primary government agency in charge of issuing citizenship, visas, and green cards is forming its own police force. As President Trump's immigration crackdown widens beyond traditional law enforcement agencies, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services says it plans to train several hundred federal law enforcement agents to look for fraud in immigration applications and arrest the immigrants in question or the lawyers who help prepare their petitions. That was from the Wall Street Journal. Joseph Edlow is director of USCIS. He was asked about this article today.
Already have a great relationship with ICE, where there is someone at one of our offices who needs to be arrested because there's an open criminal warrant, or the person, as you said, has been ordered removed or was removed 10 years ago, came back in illegally. We work with ICE to pick up someone and to have them arrested. That's not what this is supposed to be. This is not a police force, and I can't make that any more clear than I'm going to say it again. This is not a police force. What we are looking at incorporating into USCIS is an investigative agency. Think more HSI or special agents that we want to use to augment existing special agents already within the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to really do a deep dive into immigration fraud, into large mass-scale fraud, national security issues, and other criminality that is within the jurisdiction of the agency, so in kind of the immigration
So kind of more detectives, really, than police officers.
100%.
Interview with Joseph Edlow, director of USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, at a discussion in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Immigration Studies. A Politico article about this event, talking about another subject. The Trump administration is planning to make the test applicants take for U.S. citizenship more difficult, with a higher bar for passing and potentially an essay requirement. The current citizenship test requires applicants to correctly respond to at least 6 out of 10 questions drawn from a list of 100 questions available online. Applicants must also prove basic English skills. That's how Politico reported it. Here again, Joseph Edlow at today's program.
I want to see the naturalization process returned to where I believe it should have been under, based on what the Congress has said, based on what the statute says. We're looking for attachment to the Constitution. We're looking for an understanding of the civic responsibility of being a U.S. citizen. We're looking for actual understanding and ability to read and speak and write the English language. And frankly, this test is just too easy. 6 out of 10 questions right now is what people have to get right.
And all 100 are on the internet anyway, right?
Well, yeah. And what we also expect people to read a sentence on a tablet, and then they're told to write a sentence on a tablet.
Right.
So, we need to make it a little bit more challenging. We've got to make sure that people are actually understanding what it means to be a U.S. citizen, what it means to get that benefit. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to make the test harder in terms of making the questions a little bit more thought-provoking. I'm looking at other potential ways to move forward. I might even consider, if possible, moving to a standardized test format.
Like filling in with the number 2
applicants
pencil
would come in
and
a
all
different
that.
day and actually have to do that and write an essay on what does it mean to me to be an American. And let's see what people actually understand, because being able to be coached through this process right now is not something that should be allowed, and that should be that easy. And I'm seeing it, unfortunately. I've had great conversations with adjudicators in the field in various offices, and I don't like what I'm hearing. They're worried, and they're looking forward to it. They're thanking me for doing what I'm doing, which pretty much all this comes down to is I am declaring war on fraud. I am declaring war on anyone that is coming to this country and wants to get a benefit but doesn't want the responsibility of what it means to actually be a U.S. citizen.
To play devil's advocate on this issue, do you have to have a master's degree in American political science in order to be naturalized?
A very smart man once said to me, you should be smart and be able to understand what it means. We should be able to study and understand our basic history, but you shouldn't need a master's in American history. That was you.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
And I live by that. I don't want this test to be so hard that it's impossible, but I want it to be thought-provoking questions. A question of simply, hey, name 2 federal holidays, and name one branch of government or name your governor. It's simply not enough. We need to know more, especially if we're going to really understand whether someone has a true attachment to the Constitution as required by the statute.
Joseph Edlow, Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, today at a program in Washington hosted by the Center for Immigration Studies. The National News Desk writes out of Tampa, Florida, that Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the expansion of Joint Task Force Alpha to combat transnational criminal organizations involved in human trafficking and smuggling. She said too many people are dying as coyotes try to smuggle them across the U.S. border. Bondi said the JTFA, which works to combat human smuggling and trafficking, has charged 56 defendants since President Donald Trump took office in January. And a story from UPI, the Trump administration is moving to end deportation protections for Venezuelans, threatening the legal status for hundreds of thousands of people in the United States. Department of Homeland Security announced it was ending temporary protected status for Venezuela. The designation was set to expire September 10th, but will now be terminated in 60 days. They put out a statement, given Venezuela's substantial role in driving irregular migration and the clear magnet effect created by TPS, maintaining or expanding TPS for Venezuelan nationals directly undermines the Trump administration's efforts to secure our southern border and manage migration effectively. Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost, a Democrat of Florida, writing on X, Trump administration is stripping TPS for Venezuelans in the U.S. and is claiming that conditions in Venezuela are not as bad. Meanwhile, Venezuelans are going hungry and without food and medicine under the Maduro regime, but apparently that's good enough for Donald Trump. That's all reporting from UPI. The U.S. military this week attacked a boat in the Caribbean Sea that came from Venezuela, which Trump administration said was operated by the Tren de Aragua gang and was carrying drugs to the U.S. Trump administration has designated that gang as a foreign terrorist organization. Today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced during his trip to Ecuador that 2 more gangs based in that country will receive the same designation.
Today, we have designated as terrorist organizations 2 groups that operate here in Ecuadorian territory. One is Los Lobos, and the other is Los Choneros. We've designated them as foreign terrorist organizations, and that brings with it all sorts of options for the United States to work in conjunction with the government of Ecuador in the future to stamp these groups out. By the way, I want to say that we had a very successful, it was the first one in a long time, of one of these leaders of one of these groups, an extradition to the United States. We want to modernize that extradition treaty. Both sides agree. It's a pretty, we were able to get this guy because he's committed so many crimes. Even a law that was 120 years old fit him, but we need to modernize it, and we're going to work together on that. Today I can announce that we are going to be providing $13.5 million to help Ecuador with improve its ability to provide security for its citizens and take on the combat drugs and crime, and another $6 million in UAVs for the Navy here in Ecuador, again giving them domain awareness and the opportunity to really track these. These are all very important. We're going to do more. There's more coming, but that's an important step that we wanted to take here today, and I'm proud to announce it. And we're ready to support in this, what is, frankly, it's a war. It's a war on killers. It's a war on terrorists. These are not narco traffickers. These are narco terrorists who terrorize the countries they operate in.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio at a news conference in Quito, Ecuador, with the Ecuadorian foreign minister. Washington Post writes that violence has skyrocketed in Ecuador since the COVID-19 pandemic as drug traffickers expanded operations in the country and took advantage of the nation's banana industry. South American country is the world's largest exporter of bananas. Traffickers find maritime shipping containers filled with the fruit, the perfect vehicle to smuggle their product. In addition, cartels from Mexico, Colombia, and the Balkans have settled in Ecuador because it uses the U.S. dollar and has weak laws and institutions, along with a network of long-established, ruthless gangs that are eager for work. That was from the Washington Post. And this is Washington Today. From the St. Louis National Public Radio, members of the Missouri House began a special session on Wednesday aimed at ousting Democratic U.S. Congressman Emanuel Cleaver and severely restricting initiative ballot petitions with limited ability from House Democrats to stop the GOP counterparts. Lawmakers could pass a congressional map out of a newly formed redistricting committee by Thursday. Unlike in Texas, Democrats in the Missouri House can't deny Republicans a quorum by not showing up or fleeing the state. Some of the reporting from St. Louis National Public Radio. The Missouri House Special Committee on Redistricting did meet today, and State Representative Dirk Deaton, a Republican, presented the new map. Here is the committee's ranking Democrat, Mark Sharp, questioning him.
Representative, good afternoon. So going back to some comments you made earlier, 16 senators in 2022 voted with Democrats to uphold a 6-2 map. 6 of those senators are still current senators. So to say that there were people that were in support of a 7-1 map may be true, but you all were in the minority on that issue in 2022. To say that this map puts Missouri first, I think is misleading. I think this map puts D.C. first. Our own governor on record saying that this map aligns Missouri's values with D.C.'s values, I think is telling. As ranking member, I need to say this plainly. This committee hearing is not about fairness. It's about carving up communities and silencing voters. In my 6 years here, I've seen a lot of changes, but I hardly recognize this body anymore. Since 2020, this body has changed, and not for the better. In 2022, Representative, this plan had no path forward. None. So what has changed? And when did it change? One person changed it, Representative, and not for Missourians, not even for Republicans, but for raw political power. And now here, September 2025, democracy in Missouri is taking a devastating blow, Representative, one it might not recover from. Every Missourian deserves fair representation and not these political tricks, and certainly not dismantling of fair democracy. My city, Representative, Kansas City, hangs in the balance right here, right now. I can't tell you how angry I am. This type of policy is morally corrupt and inexcusable. It will not end well, not for this General Assembly, not for our state, because if we continue down this road, Representative, of dividing communities for partisan gain only, other states will follow. And do you think that's right? Do you?
There's a lot there. I'd like to respond to as much of it as I can as I recall your questions there, and maybe some or most of them were rhetorical. I would disagree with several things you said. I think it's a opinion that you're certainly entitled to. My thought, my opinion on it is a little bit different. Just on the last one there, I do think, well, a lot of this is opinions, and as courts have said about redistricting, it's fundamentally a political question. And we're political actors. You're elected, from one political party, I from another, different parts of the state. We have certain beliefs and values we run on. This is the political branch of government. We understand that. And we're trying to effectuate, whatever the session, whatever the bill, some sort of political change as we do our work up here. But I think just objectively, it is not true to say that this, splits more communities or more counties. In fact, it's less. Now, redistricting is difficult. And as I've looked at this and, you think about changing anything, you change one line, you got to change 6 other lines. We have, or 7, we have 8 congressional districts. And getting equal population, which is one of the constitutional and legal requirements, equal representation you have to have, that's very difficult to achieve because people don't live just spread out equally across the state, so that's challenging. And so, unfortunately, in some regard, a county or a city might have to be split at some point. You want to minimize that as much as possible. And the great thing about this map is that there is actually fewer county and municipal splits than the current congressional map we're under. Now, I know where you come from, Representative, and I know that now there's maybe a county or a place that would be split that maybe wasn't previously, and I understand how that could be a sensitive matter for those folks, how, some might feel that's as good or better. Others might think that that's, they like the way it currently is. But, of course, then at the same time, you have other counties that now are totally contained. And they probably, and there's more of those, frankly, and they might view that as a superior thing.
In Jefferson City, Missouri, the Missouri House Special Committee on Redistricting, you heard from Dirk Deaton testifying. He's a Republican. He presented the new congressional district map. And the questions from the committee's ranking Democrat, Mark Sharp. More from the St. Louis NPR article about this. The redistricting push comes as President Donald Trump pressured GOP-leaning states like Missouri, Texas, Indiana, and Florida to redraw their congressional lines before the 2026 midterm elections. California voters will soon decide whether to create a map that could elect more Democrats. And Illinois and Maryland are also considering redrawing their congressional lines. In Washington, D.C., the U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, took a question about this at his news conference.
You mentioned you thought redistricting was going to backfire on Republicans. I'm curious, why do you think that? And more broadly, is there a concern that if district lines are constantly changing around the country, that it might discourage people from running for Congress if they know that there's so much instability?
We need one national redistricting standard to prevent the type of toxic shenanigans that Donald Trump and Republicans are engaging in by trying to gerrymander congressional maps in the middle of the decade to try to rig the midterm elections. That's a Democratic position, and it has always been that. The problem, of course, is that we have Republicans who are trying to play by a different set of rules. And the Democratic position has been, we will not play by a different set of rules. We will continue to forcefully, aggressively, and immediately respond, just as we did in California. Republicans were apparently operating under the misguided notion that we were going to let them get away with trying to rig the midterm elections without a forceful response. They were badly mistaken. And at the end of the day, it's not going to work out well for them. And they will not be able to mathematically rig the midterm elections, which is what their original intention was when this process started. House Republicans know they can't mathematically get to an outcome that will stop us from taking back the majority. We know it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it yet is Donald Trump.
When you say backfire, though, are you talking about a voter backlash or just the Democratic response in states like California?
Both. There is a clear voter backlash. Even in Texas, this effort is unpopular. And by the way, Republicans took a gerrymandered map in Texas that already violated the Voting Rights Act, and they made it worse. And so what they've done is strengthen our case that the Texas congressional map violates both the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution and Section 2 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And we look forward to the court hearing that is going to take place next month.
U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, news conference on Capitol Hill. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, President Donald Trump will host a high-powered list of tech CEOs for a dinner at the White House on Thursday night. The guest list is set to include Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and a dozen other executives from the biggest artificial intelligence and tech firms, according to the White House. The event will follow a meeting of the White House's new Artificial Intelligence Education Task Force, which First Lady Melania Trump will chair. That was the preview from Associated Press. Here is First Lady Melania Trump opening up the task force meeting.
Cars now steer themselves through our cities. Robots hold steady hands in the operating room. And drones are redefining the future of war. Innovations of first-generation humanoids, factory automation, and autonomous vehicles have surged from private sector investment. Every one of these advancements is powered by AI. The robots are here. Our future is no longer science fiction. Data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis shows that AI innovation is clearly boosting America's GDP growth. Surely this is not a trend, for AI will serve as the underpinning of every business sector in our nation, including education, life sciences, finance, and design. In fact, I predict AI will represent the single largest growth category in our nation during this administration, and I won't be surprised if AI becomes known as the greatest engine of progress in the history of the United States of America. But as leaders and parents, we must manage AI's growth responsibly. During this primitive stage, it is our duty to treat AI as we would our own children, empowering but with watchful guidance. Today, in this room, is filled with the brightest minds of our time. As such, I challenge you to focus on 3 strategic priorities of AI's ecosystem so America can lead in shaping a new, magnificent world. Infrastructure and energy, national security, and of course, talent.
First Lady Melania Trump at a meeting at the White House of the White House Artificial Intelligence Education Task Force. It's the second overall meeting of the task force this year. And they were joined by, as a White House press release says, private sector leaders from the more than 135 pledges made to support AI education in America. And one of the speakers, the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai.
Mrs. Trump, Director Kratsios, esteemed cabinet officials, hello, and it's a real honor for me to be here to support the First Lady's Presidential AI Challenge. I think you're really inspiring young people to use technology in extraordinary ways. It's a deeply important issue for us as a company. At Google, we see AI as the most profound way we'll deliver on our mission and transform knowledge and learning. We really imagine a future where every student, regardless of their background or location, can learn anything in the world in a way that works best for them. We've been really focused on this for decades. It's why we built Chromebooks for every classroom, why we have worked to make our AI model, Gemini, one of the best models for learning. It's why we are offering our Gemini for Education to every high school in America. We are providing access to every high school student and every teacher with our best AI tools, including guided learning. We recently committed $1 billion over the next 3 years to support education and job training programs in the US. And today, I'm excited to share that $150 million of that $1 billion will go towards grants to support AI education and digital well-being. This includes support to Code.org to transform its curriculum and integrate new AI features. We're also providing support to the Flourish Fund to support nonprofits helping youth aging out of the foster care system with tools to succeed in the workplace. For college students, our AI for Education Accelerator has expanded from 100 colleges and universities to 200, including the Texas A&M University System and Iowa's community colleges. And we've set up a centralized place for teachers and parents to get all our best AI training in one place, something we've heard can be really helpful. This is all in the service of helping the next generation to solve problems, fuel innovation, and build an incredible future. These are all goals we all share. We are incredibly thankful for the partnership and the leadership from the First Lady, the President, and the administration, and for showing us the way. Thank you.
Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, at today's White House Artificial Intelligence Education Task Force meeting led by First Lady Melania Trump. And CNN writes that President Donald Trump will host tech leaders for a dinner in the state dining room after inclement weather forced him to scrap plans to hold it in the Rose Garden, a White House official said. The event would have been the first to be held in the newly renovated space. It was raining heavily in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. That was from CNN. And before we leave, we're pleased to share some C-SPAN news with all of you. Beginning this fall, all 3 C-SPAN networks will be available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. C-SPAN's availability on these streaming platforms expands access to our network's trusted, unfiltered coverage of U.S. government. Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, the Senate President Pro Tem, spoke about this today on the Senate floor.
I'm pleased to follow up on a topic that I discussed with my Senate colleagues. That topic was on June the 2nd, and it was on the 39th anniversary of C-SPAN covering the Senate. I led the Senate with Senators Klobuchar, Young, and Wyden in passing a resolution highlighting the importance of continuous Senate coverage for all Americans and the need for live coverage of C-SPAN to be accessible on all platforms. Yesterday, both Hulu and YouTube announced that YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV will be carrying the C-SPAN networks so Americans can watch Congress actions in real time and see our democracy at work through a nonpartisan lens. I thank all of these entities for being committed to this public service.
Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, on the Senate floor today, and we'll keep you updated on the launch date. It'll happen this fall when all three C-SPAN networks will be available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. And thank you for watching and listening wherever you follow C-SPAN. This has been Washington Today. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy, from Washington, D.C. to across the country. Coming up Friday morning, Sarah Longwell, founder and publisher of The Bulwark, talks about media coverage of U.S. politics and the Trump administration, and John Ulyat, former spokesman for the National Security Council and deputy assistant to President Trump, on the Trump administration's approach on national security matters. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join the conversation live at 7 Eastern Friday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.